It's not on, maybe.
No? And so.
Yes? Huh?
Yep, there it is, there it is. It's on.
Oh, I can change my own slides, really?
There you go.
Okay.
There's your clicker.
Yeah, right click, great. Okay, I wasn't initially going to give a trigger warning about this, but I'm gonna talk about some pretty heavy topics relating to death. So please just kind of brace yourselves a little bit. Can't really see anything on the board. Is there anything on the board? Click it again. There you go. Okay. Hi, I'm Hope Loudon, and I am going to talk about dignity and death. American society is very, very good at bestowing dignity upon the dead. We do this in the form of funerals, flowers, prayers, apologies, and regrets. I'm afraid what we're not good at is bestowing dignity upon the dying. Sometimes when people are afraid of losing their loved ones, they protect themselves by loving less, by caring less, and by being there less. Sometimes it's as though their loved ones are already dead. It makes perfect sense, and who could blame them? If you love the new baby, if you bestow dignity upon it by giving it a name, cleaning it, and caring for it, it's that much sadder for you if it's gone. But to me, dignity is loving, caring, and trying. Do we not owe it to every creature to try? To me, dignity is treating the living like the living until the last breath. It's treating the living like the living until rigor mortis sets in, and maybe even a little afterwards. Or in the words of a very close friend who's in the audience tonight and who provided this photo and who lost her mother of cancer. Dignity is when someone says, "Will you hold my hand?" And you say yes. And even when it cools, "Can I stay?" That is bestowing dignity. We don't talk about dignity and death in school. There's no dignity and death 101. But I'm very lucky that I had some amazing teachers. My first teacher was my dog, Bumblebee. This is Bumblebee. Bumblebee was my friend, my confidant, my sister, in a sense. She was also my driving instructor. Because I just needed someone to sit there while I drove. And my mom was not that person. So, when I passed my driving test on the third try by the skin of my teeth, I looked at Bumblebee and I said, "Can you teach me how to drive?" And I said, "Want to go for a ride?" And not once did she ever refuse. And she would sit there happily, non-judgmentally, and patiently as I learned how to drive. And we spent a lot of time together doing it. Unfortunately, Bumblebee was diagnosed with oral cancer, and it came back at the age of 18 when I was getting my first apartment. Oral cancer is a horrible disease, okay? It's terrible. And unfortunately, when dogs get oral cancer, a lot of times they also get oral infections, which means that they snort, they sneeze, they snot, they drool, and they stink. Sometimes the stench was almost unbearable. But I wasn't gonna let that, or the fact that my apartment didn't allow dogs, deny the privilege of me taking care of her. So I said she'd move in with me, and I did the best I can, and I set to waiting on her hand and foot. But I was always asking myself questions. Questions like, am I doing the right thing? What if she's in any pain? What if I should call the doctor and expedite the process? At what point is it better to die than to live. And am I doing enough? Is my love enough to bestow dignity? I ask myself questions all the time, and I asked her too, and I always hoped that she would tell me when she was ready. Then there were the regrets. Things like, why didn't I play soccer with her more often? She loved it. Why did I work that horrible minimum wage job that I absolutely hated? And during the last months of her relative health. Ever forgiving, ever noble, I think she understood. But still, I wondered, until I met my second teacher. I had just arrived on the island of Ometepe in Nicaragua. I sat down to a beautiful farm fresh breakfast, and I was about to dig in when I heard this Canadian tourist say, "Ugh, what is that thing? It stinks. They should just kill it." And I looked over, and as I watched him gather up his newspaper and move to another table, I realized that the object of his disgust was a brown chihuahua. And I realized from the fact that that was the stench, and she was missing part of her bottom jaw, as is common with surgeries for oral cancer, that she was probably dying of the same oral infection that killed Bumblebee. From then on, I decided that I was going to acknowledge her. I was going to love her. Because this is a dog who was loved, who was petted and cared for. And then she got sick. And people didn't want to be anywhere near her. She was a leper, and no one would touch her anymore. She must have wondered, what is wrong with me? Why don't they love me anymore? And so, one time, I decided to sit at her table, as her tables were always empty. I sat down, and I acknowledged her, petted her, said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And she put her paw on my thigh and looked up at me as if to say, "Can I sit with you?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, come on." And she sat on my lap for several hours. When I absolutely had to get up, I had no other choice. She followed me. She followed me into the darkness as I tried to find my bungalow, and it broke my heart to refuse her. And so the next day I decided that I would do what I could to love her in the present while I was there. And I discovered that I knew all the tricks. For example, if you carry around a dirty shirt or an old napkin, you can spread that over your pants. They're not going to get drool on your pants. So I did, and she followed me for several days, everywhere I went, because she was so starved for attention. But I loved her, and I cared for her. And people judged her, and people judged me. They'd look at her and say, "Oh, gross. Kill it. This is awful." But she had energy. She ate what I gave her. I think the cancer was gone. But no one was treating her like she was living. And that is sometimes a fate worse than death. When I left her with a shirt and a collar. And I cried. And I know that her life went back to the same loneliness and isolation. But at least I hope that it was punctuated by some dignity. And I was very lucky when this year, during the same 6 months, I had 3 family members pass away, and I was able to use those lessons that I learned from my 4-legged teachers. This is my grandfather, affectionately known as Nipper. And I decided that I was going to be with him and love him too. Do everything in my power to make sure he knew that. And so I went over and I read to him and I talked to him and I acknowledged him. And I held his hand. And I tried excitedly. I'd run up the stairs and see if I could catch him when it was right before the morphine hit and he might be a little lucid. He was very deeply afflicted with Alzheimer's, so he wasn't always completely in touch with reality. But he used to tell us the most beautiful stories. He would put on his hiking boots and drape his feet off the bed and tell us that he was hiking and he needed to wear them because he was walking through the forest. He was climbing a mountain, and there was a house on the top of this mansion, or on the top of this mountain. Sometimes he would call it a mansion, sometimes he would call it a shack, and he said that it was a true treasure. He said that there were people waiting for him there, and he was just trying to get there, but it was awfully hard. And so he told me that he lamented he couldn't give us a map, and it was a true treasure, and we should go if we ever get the chance. We told him, if we get the chance, we'll know our way. And then, on my final goodbye, I went up to him in a moment when I might catch him in between the meds. I ran to his side and knelt beside him, and I held his hand. He woke up, and I said, "I love you." And I said, "Nipper, I'm going to the Grand Canyon." And he said, "Great. Don't let the mules push you around."
Very good.
And I said, "I won't. I'll see you down there." And every day, I made sure that I left him on the note that I wanted to leave him on. And I'd say, "Nipper, I know you're really busy, and so I'm coming back tomorrow, but if you're busy and you have to go somewhere, it's okay. I'll catch you some other time. It's okay if you're not here when I come." And he'd say, "Okay." And so, when I taught kids in Taiwan at a summer camp this summer, I decided to teach them a little bit about death and dignity. And I decided to do that in what I call the I love you grandma speech. I'd say, "Kids, have you ever told someone, 'I love your t-shirt'? Or, 'You're a really good friend'? Or how about, 'I love you, Grandma'?" And Grandma said, "What the heck is wrong with you? Why would you ever say that to me? I'm going to tell your mom and dad you said that to me. You're in big trouble." Did that ever happen? No, right? Got one hand in the back. No, it doesn't usually happen. So I tell the kids, say "I love you, Grandma," if you get the chance. In English, we like to say the saying, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. I like to teach it a little differently. If you have something nice to say, never leave it unsaid, because people don't live forever. So I told my kids that. And so, how does this affect my life? Well, this is my mom. And she's recovering from knee surgery, which she had September 27th. And I was actually scheduled to tour the Southwest in my red 91 Cadillac Coupe de Ville. But knowing how much it would mean to her, to have me there when she went in, and to have me there when she woke up, I wasn't going to miss the chance to do that. Because I know that I can get intimacy with someone in a time of need and vulnerability in one instant that I may not be able to achieve in the preceding decade under normal circumstances. And so this is a privilege. And I decided that I was going to be there, so I drove 12 hours across Texas. I left my car in New Mexico, and I took a red eye, and I was there in the morning for her to go into surgery. And I brought her chips from Texas for when she got out. Thank you, everyone, and please tell your grandmothers you love them.